Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTube at War, a new BookTube event debuting in 2023, thought up by a viewer, DDB, and made into a BookTube event by Michael K. Vaughan, and designed to read military literature. Fiction, nonfiction, poetry, science fiction, memoir, whatever you want to do. Anything that generates from war or military operations all throughout the month of July. I have been mostly going at this event in the same way that I've gone at other YouTube events in 2023, which is to sort of spin the wheel every night and add a themed book to my night's pile of reading. That's hit a few roadblocks in July, where my night's pile of reading sometimes has been co-opted by work, and sometimes where I just haven't felt like doing any exploratory reading or even rereading, just pure comfort reading. But last night, I'm not 100% sure where the last week of BookTube at War is going to take me, but I wanted to read something military last night. So I added to my pile a UK trade paperback that I just recently found of a book that I've already read. I've read it a couple of times. It's Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. His famous book from like 1999 about a U.S. military mission to Mogadishu in Somalia in 1993. In which an elite team were tasked with just routine, tough if you don't like it, American adventurism. We're gonna go in, we're gonna abduct a couple of henchmen, a couple of lieutenants from a local warlord, get them out, extract them. We'll do whatever the hell we want with them. And if we kill a few civilians in going in or coming out, so what? We're America. And that the mission goes horribly, horribly wrong. A couple of those attack helicopters are downed by people who one military expert at the time was saying had slingshots. Well, they obviously had better than slingshots. And Mark Bowden tells the whole story from front to back. The command posts in Washington, but also especially the men on the ground, literally on the ground. And it's gripping. I read this when it first came out. I thought it was tremendously well done. Then I saw the movie. There's a movie called Black Hawk Down that is tremendously well done. It is tremendously effective. And I think the next time I read Black Hawk Down, I think it might have been that I found a trade paperback with the Josh Hartnett movie cover and thought, well, I love the book, I love the movie, so I'll read the book again. And I think when I did, I read it through the lens of the movie. And that was a long time ago. So I came at this last night pretty fresh and was struck all over again by what a great writer this guy is. I know I'm Mark Bowden's big fanboy here, but I guess I've mentioned many times before his book Worm about the Conficker virus, which is a completely different kind of war. It's a digital war, but every bit as gripping as this. And this is the book that shot him to fame. This is the book that really put him on a first name, a name recognition basis in the publishing world, in the news program world, to have him on to talk about something. And all of that was familiar to me, but much more so on its own. They're playing with, I don't know if you can hear the sirens, but they're playing with each other. The cars there are two cars, and they're playing games with each other in terms of the sirens. Is that illegal? Yes. Can they be fired for doing that? Yes. Okay, as long as we're covering that. But they're playing with each other. In other words, they're that far away from there being an emergency. They're just making noise in the neighborhood. That's all they're doing, is making noise in the neighborhood because they can. Because if you go out into the street and object, they'll shoot you. And they won't even be suspended from their desk for a week. They certainly won't lose their benefits. But anyway, just in case you could hear that, because they're playing games with each other now. But I went at this book again last night. I don't know that this UK trade paperback is really going to hold up to another read, but it held up quite well. I've noticed UK trade paperbacks are very sturdy things. I want to read you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here. This is from the viewpoint of a Somali teenager who is watching how the American soldiers, who are in complete distress now, they know that their mission has gone south, he's watching them and seeing how they behave. He saw one of the Americans who roped down pick up an M16 from a man he had just shot. As the soldier came toward him, Aden panicked. He slid out from under the car and ran back into his house, slamming the door shut. He ran into a small storage room at the front that had 2 windows, one that faced out over the alleyway where the helicopter lay, because the helicopter was crashed. The other that looked out on Maryland Road where more Rangers were descending. The intersection and alley then swarmed with American soldiers, and the shooting was loud, constant, and accelerating. The walls of his house were built of heavy stone, so he had a safe ringside seat. Aden watched the American soldiers climb hurriedly in and out of the wrecked helicopter. They pulled a pilot out and carried him to the tail end of it. The pilot had a deep and terrible cut across his face, and he looked eerily white and was clearly dead. 2 of the Rangers placed a big gun on top of the Fiat across the street, which struck Aden as funny. It turned the little car into a kind of technical bridge. Another of the soldiers crawled right into the trash hole. Aden's family and their neighbors disposed of trash by digging holes or ditches in the street outside their house and filling it with their dumpings. When it was full, they burned it. This soldier just dug himself into the trash. Only his head and rifle stuck out from the debris. He was shooting steadily. You have to wonder, I have to wonder when I was rereading sections like that, did Bowden talk to Aden? Did he find Aden's family? Where does that detail come from? I totally believe that it happened, but where does it come from? And that thought actually came to my mind many times when I was rereading this. It's such an engrossing narrative that you forget that Bowden had to find out about all this stuff. What a huge task that must have been, to find out all of these details. It wouldn't have been just interviewing the military personnel, although you'd want to interview them and you'd want to cross-check their stories against each other. Like, for instance, we have a scene here where this is well into the catastrophe. This is when the time frame on this book is very short. It makes it all the more dramatically satisfying. But the catastrophe is now well underway. Everyone knows that this is, not only are you not going to do your mission, but you'll be lucky if you all get out alive, if any of you get out alive. And so we're in the midst of these men. That's all the men that we're talking about here. Goodale was in high spirits for somebody who, with a second hole through his ass. He's been shot in the buttocks. He showed off his canteen with a bullet hole through it. He felt no pain from the round that had passed through his thigh and left a nasty wound on his right buttock. It wasn't very dignified. When Floyd had come huffing in after all the men had been waved into the courtyard from the street, he took one look at the medic stuffing Curlex up Goodale's exit wound and said, "You like taking it up the ass, eh, Goodale?" In the same back room was Errico, a machine gunner who had been wounded in both biceps manning his gun, and Nethery, who'd been wounded in the upper arm when he took over for Errico. Nethery was distressed. The bullet had damaged both bicep and tricep, and he couldn't make his right arm work at all. One of the wounded men was crying, starting to freak out. "We're going to die here," he kept repeating. "We're never going home." Worse off was Lechner, who was now on a morphine drip. When Sergeant Remiglia first came into the dark back room, he flopped down into what he felt was a warm puddle. Then he realized it was Lechner's blood. The room smelled of blood, and strong, musky stint with a faint metallic tinge, like copper, an odor none of them would forget. That indicates that he's getting this from these men. Watson came back at one point looking for more ammunition. They were down to about half the supply they'd carried in. They're firing constantly at hundreds of Somalis around them. "I have some flashbangs if you want them," said Goodale. That is a device that the military uses. It's meant to completely stun and disorient someone. You throw it into a room. It's loud, it's incredibly bright, it's concussive. It's meant to sort of stun your opponents. And if you know that it's coming and they don't, you have an unbelievable advantage. There's no way to recover quickly from a flashbang. So you're pretty much helpless while it's happening. So this guy says, "I have some flashbangs if you want them," said Goodale. "No, Goodale, I don't want flashbangs," he said with gentle scorn. "We're not scaring them anymore. We're going to kill them now." Like the rest of the guys, Goodale was frustrated at how long it was taking for the rescue convoy to come. That's an amazing moment when the temporary commander of this little besieged group of men is saying, "No, we don't need flashbangs because we're not trying to frighten anybody anymore. They know we're here. We want to kill them because they want to kill us." This was terrific. I loved rereading it. I love reading UK trade paperbacks anyway, but this one, I loved it. And I loved especially how daringly non-black and white it is. It had to be such a temptation for Mark Bowden to make this black and white. Other accounts of this have been black and white. It had to have been so tempting for him to do that. He's getting a lot of this stuff firsthand from the men who survived it. It's got to be so tempting when you're there and getting their confidences and talking to them over beers and whatnot to make them the heroes. And this book has no heroes and no villains. Resolutely, it doesn't. And I'm more admiring of that now than I was the first couple of times I read it. So that's my field report for BookTube at War, is Black Hawk Down. I believe that I'll be going much further back in time than this for my next field report. No idea when that will be. It could be tomorrow. We shall see. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.